Carl Schmitt's doing. I mentioned Schmitt in relation to De Man, because I think the De Man affair was quite traumatic for Derrida. And there is something about the invocation of Schmitt. If you think De Man is a Nazi, look at this other guy I'm working on. There is a repetition, there is a compulsion to repeat something in that move to Schmitt. And of course there's the Heidegger in the background as well. In touching on the shamelessness of shame, of the tendency to obliterate from one's record and even memory the guilt and shame that one needs to accept and work through, we touch on an element of performativity that I think Derrida has managed to sanitize a bit too much for comfort. And I'll end on that thought. So I think I've tried to probe in there a little bit and pull out something which isn't so nice necessarily, although this doesn't make me reject Derrida in any sense, in the same way that I've never rejected Heidegger, in the sense I wouldn't fully reject Schmitt either. I think one just has to be mature about realizing these various facets of work when we read it, and not to overlook it. So I'll end there. And I think we now have something to discuss.
Just note for the record, I can't speak for Jonathan, but I've never had sex in a photo booth in a paid station.
You haven't lived.
I'm missing something. No.
Yeah, I want to, without addressing what you've said explicitly, Herman, or at least not yet, I want to add something to what you've presented. And that's something about performativity and art, and it touches on the first and third of your types of performativity. And it's something that I think Derrida struggles with right from the start of his articulation of iterability and his deconstructing the performative constitutive distinction. If you look at the discussion that followed the paper, Signature Event Context, it was a roundtable discussion with some French philosophers and also an audience that was allowed to pose questions as well. And in that discussion, two philosophers asked Derrida about the possibility of a non-iterable mark. And when Derrida asks them to give examples, they both say the artwork. They both contend the artwork as a non-iterable mark. And Derrida disagreed with them. And one of the philosophers in that discussion was Paul Ricoeur. And I just want to read an exchange between Ricoeur and Derrida around the question of the relation of art to iterability. I'll read it out as it appears in the published version. So Derrida is asking, he's saying, go on, give me an example of a mark that's not iterable. So two philosophers have said art. So then Paul Ricoeur says, by means of iterability we re-identify because there are non-re-identifiable iterables. Derrida. For example, Ricoeur, that which is other. Derrida. Non-iterable identifiable. Ricoeur. No. Non-identifiable iterable. Derrida. For example, Ricoeur. Well, I've heard two performances of a symphony, and I don't recognize Beethoven. Somebody has, however, pretended to give me another performance. I say, no, it's not the same. Derrida. You say that you didn't identify. Ricoeur. Yes, that's correct. That's why the essential problem with the artwork is not such that we repeat a performance, but that I recognize the same. Derrida. You have two different identifications. The identification of the original that you think you recognize enough in order to distinguish it from the non-original, and the identification of the bad performance. In the second case, however, there is iterability, recur. And of what? Derrida. Of the original model that you know to be sufficiently repeatable in order to distinguish it from the bad copy, and then from this bad copy, recur. But it's necessary that it's the same in order for me to be able to say that we repeat it. Derrida. Yes, recur. But that's what's in question. Derrida. But in order for you to say that you don't recognize Beethoven, you have to have something of Beethoven, some fragment of him, a memory, recur, an original performance, a sort of expert witness, Derrida. Yes, and one which is itself repeatable. If it wasn't repeatable, you wouldn't be able to distinguish it from what looks like a bad performance, an aberration. So this touches on destination. Recur, perhaps. So that's the exchange. So the exchange is around whether art is iterable. But what I want to draw your attention to is the very beginning of it. So when Recur says that which is other, which is an artwork is other, is an example of otherness, that's what's not iterable. Derrida says it's a non-iterable identifiable, whereas Recur says, no, it's a non-identifiable iterable. So, you have here Derrida's being, right from the start of his theory of iterability, being faced with art as that which isn't iterable, or at least if it is iterable, there's something other about its iterability that doesn't quite fit with his account. And this, I think this problem with art touches on the question of signature. The Truth in Painting book begins by asking, is there a speech act theory for painting? And he doesn't answer that question. And iterability is not mentioned once in that text, in Truth in Painting. That's Derrida's kind of magnum opus on art, that text, containing texts from over a period of years on art.
You have all those repetitions of the Titus Carmel.
Yeah, no iterability isn't mentioned once. That's what I mean. It could be a different kind of.
Isn't it the plus though? The plus R? Isn't that the
Plus
iterability,
N.
The plus. Well, yes, that
Plus
plus.
N.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not iterability. It's not iterability in that text. Okay, so he asked the question: is there a speech act theory relevant for art? He doesn't answer the question, and he doesn't talk about art in terms of iterability, which is the central concept of performativity. Now, added to that is what I think could be a kind of privileging of literature, and this touches on your textuality and aperture. Privileging of literature in this concept of performativity or iterability and the way in which literature might bring that into question. For example, with Ponge and his fable, which is like, it's a hybrid of performativity and constitutivity. So it's a hybrid of these two. So literature can be a hybrid of performativity and constitutivity. When he talks about the relationship between saying anything or saying everything, which is literature, literature's right to say everything, and democracy is the space in which you can say everything, and it's the only political paradigm that can bring itself into question through its right, through the right we have to say anything. And that anything can include bringing democracy into question. Again, it's always the literary speech act that assumes a kind of privilege or authority in this account. And in his notion of the university without condition, where the university is the space of the unconditional right to say anything, he explicitly says that its privilege and its authority, the privilege and the authority of that right to say anything, rests with the humanity.